And I wanted
Mm.
to get a complete understanding because when I was reading all this stuff in Subject Confinement, right? I got angry because I was like, how is this not common? Why are you giving us fantasy books? Why are you giving us sports books? Why are you give us trauma books? And so I went on a journey and I said, I need to understand why we do what we do.
In a world that often pulls us apart, More in Common brings us back to what matters. Hosted by Gerren Taylor and Keith Richardson, this isn't your average podcast. It's a challenge to think deeper, question louder, and grow further. At More in Common, we work with NFL teams, tech companies, and professionals across industries to improve communication and foster compassion. And with a focus on emotional intelligence, we aim to bring a wealth of experience to help you navigate the complexities of human connection. We've never been more connected and yet more isolated. We want to explore the roots of that tension and offer a way back to what we all need: real human connection. Enjoy the show.
And welcome back to the More in Common podcast. I thought you said you were going to kick us off, Keith.
No, I wasn't going to say, I don't want to steal your thunder anymore, G. Like, you got to introduce the episode. That's your thing.
That's our running gag. We are back with our good friend Jesse discussing a plethora of topics through healing, through being formerly incarcerated, and the journey, my man, that you have been on and are on is absolutely inspirational. But I know, Keith, you had a question too, though. So
Yeah. We talk a lot about the elements of emotional and mental health, right? Especially as men talking amongst ourselves, having this conversation. And there's something that you said last, in our, not last in our conversation, but in our last conversation regarding um, the idea that it's not my fault. But you said at the very beginning, but I take full accountability for my actions. And in this journey, you had moments or probably a lengthy period of time where you also, why me? Why me? Why me? So starting this journey to healing, as we're going to get into, that's a huge element of it, right? Is knowing that what happened to you is not your fault and still taking accountability for the actions that you took. Like, how did you get to that point in order to then start the healing journey?
Okay, so for me, like I said, there is a lot of years that I had the question of why me. And then when I came
Hmm.
across this book, and this book opened when you read a lot of these books, when you go to the back, it gives you a lot of different books for reference or stuff like that you can look
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
So I did that. So I started looking at other books. But one of the things I always tell people is when I talk about my story, when I talk about my change, I don't ever want people to think that, oh, he's trying to justify his actions. Absolutely not. None of my actions are justifiable, but I can explain how I develop the psychological makeup to make that action okay. So for me, the more I read, the more I learned that what happened to me was not my fault, right? These things that happened, the abuse that happened, it eroded my empathy. So empathy is something that you're not born with. Nothing you're taught by, again, the architects of your life, your caregiver. And so looking back, I don't ever have memories of being taught to be empathetic, to be giving, to be caring. And so I started to learn that I had to develop this. And that's when I was talking about having mentors has been very, very instrumental in my change because they're my models of what an empathetic person is. Right. And so I started developing like the biggest thing that helped me was to learn what remorse was, right? Instead of regret. Oh, I regretting
Hmm.
doing this. Regret, in my opinion, and from what I was taught, was regret is like, damn, I regret that I did it because now I'm incarcerated. And remorse is I feel bad because my actions caused harm. And therefore I need to do something about it. And remorse for me, you have to attach change to it because you can't be remorseful and then do the same action, 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 action. So from age 12 to 18, there was a lot of regret in my life. Man, I should have done that. Look at me now. I'm in cuff. Man, I should have done that. Here I am again.
Mm,
But when I started developing remorse was like, hey, don't do that because now look at what your actions are doing to other people's family. Or look what it's doing to this person. Right. And so attach empathy to remorse. That's when my change started to happen because now when I did something to somebody, right? Like I felt the pain because I could like when I say certain things to somebody verbally, because you can harm people verbally just as you can physically. And so when I would say something, I would see the body language. I would feel the energy. And I was like, oh man, I apologize, for saying that and hurting you. Because before I used to be like, oh well, you don't like it? That's your problem. Right. But for me, it was developing the understanding of the difference between regret and remorse. And that remorse requires to not repeat the same behavior. Because if you truly feel bad about your actions, then you don't repeat them, right? And again, empathy is connected to that for me. So when I
Hmm.
do something for to somebody, um, I know that not only am I harming this person, but I'm harming myself because then I'm creating a bad habit of just saying, "Well, oh well, they'll get over it," right? So it was really hard for me because I had been callous for so long, right? And my empathy was never nourished, just like my self esteem was never nourished, right? And so at that time when I did what I did, I knew what I was doing was wrong, but there was
mm.
what I believed to be the key component to not repeat it was empathy. I didn't have empathy for people. I was so callous, so it made it easier for me to do the careless things that I was doing.
And so you're on this journey. You're getting these different books. You're reading the bibliographies. Now you're on self study. How do you get out of solitary?
Okay, so um, some people may know this, right? That are familiar with the California prison system. So in 2011, right, there was a statewide hunger strike. There was a lot of us were sitting back there in solitary confinement with undetermined sentences, meaning we're supposed to spend the rest of our sentences incarcerated in solitary confinement. And they should tell us there's only one way to get out of here. You either parole, which I didn't have a parole date, or pine box, meaning you die. So, there was a lot of abuse happening by the prison guards back there, right? And so a lot of us got tired of how we were being treated, right? And a lot of people were saying, "Well, you guys are playing the victim." No, we had no problem being back there because we chose to be back there because of our actions. A lot of us knew, like, "Hey, we did this," and so we're back here because of our actions. Like I said, I put myself in that place because of my actions, right? But the abuse that we were enduring back there was not. It was just we were being treated humanely, right? And so a lot of us got tired of it. So we went on a massive hunger strike across the state of California, from 2011 to 2013.
How do you
And
coordinate that? Sorry.
well, it takes a lot of time, and we had people that we would write to, and they would send to other prisons, and it would just how everybody text messages like in a group. So we had to have one group of people messaging different people like, "Hey, this is on this date at this time. This is what we're all doing." Right? And just because we're back there doesn't mean you lose a lot of communication. It just snail mail. Remember the snail mail? So that's how we communicate, snail mail. And say, "Hey, this is how it's going to be done, and this is what we're looking to this is what we're looking to accomplish." Because they were using a point system to validate you and put you in social confinement for an indeterminate sentence. And we thought and believed that there was a lot of flaws in that system because it would just take somebody on the yard to not like it, be like, "Hey, Keith is this, and two, three people say that, and they accumulate points against you, right? And then you go do something violent, and then, oh, but we already had all these points, validate him, put him in solitary confinement for the rest of his life." And again, I take full responsibility for my actions. I'm not saying that the system played me or conspired against me. No, my actions of being the violent person, doing the things that I was doing, led me to being back there. But again, it was the abuse, and we just got fed up. A lot of people got fed up. So everybody went on hunger strikes throughout the system. Finally, took them to court. CDC said, okay, we're not going to do undetermined sentence. And they started putting everybody back out in the general population, right? However, my change was already like in like it was in the works, right? But being cooked up in a little 6x9 for a decade, and now you don't get no ice cream. You don't get a lot of things that everybody does in the general population. So you get out and you're like a kid in a candy store. And so I relapsed. I relapsed and I went back to the lifestyle, right? And it wasn't until I was being transferred to another institution where I got there, and then when I got off the bus, his name's Sergeant Freeman. He came up to me with a clipboard and he says, "Hey, you're Mr. Rodriguez?" I said, "Yes, sir." He goes, "Come with me." And I was like, "Well, you're not gonna take my cuffs off?" He's like, "No, come. We need to have a conversation." I was like, "Oh, what is this about?" And he took me in his office and he says, "Hey, sir, you can't be here." I said, "What do you mean? I just got approved for a transfer. This is where they sent me." He's like, "Yeah, well, we have two guys here that don't want to program with you." I said, "Well, that's fine." I said, "I can sign off. Like, I have no problem with nobody. Like, whoever it is, I'll sign off." He goes, "No, no, no. They don't want to sign off. They don't want you here." I was like, "Well, who is it?" He's like, "Why? I can't tell you that." And so here I go back to solitary confinement because they can't place me there. And while I was in solitary confinement, I wrote my mentor a very angry letter, like these piece of crap guys, this and this and that. And I'm blaming everything on them. And then I get a letter back. So I got thrown into solitary confinement while pending transfer. And because it wasn't my fault, it wasn't an adverse action. It was just like, hey, we can't find you a bed here, so you got to get transferred. They put you in solitary confinement, and you're able to get a phone call because you're not there for punishment. You're there because
Mm,
institutional.
right.
So I write a letter to my mentor, telling him about these guys are piece of this, piece of that. I'm going off on the letter. So when I call my mentor, I say, "Hey, what's up, Henry?" His name is Henry Morales. He passed away, right? And when I get on the phone, I said, "Hey, bro, so I'm still waiting here. I'm still sitting back here in solitary confinement. I'm still waiting to get transferred." He's like, "Hey, I got your letter." And then he just lets me have it. He's like, "Hey, bro, I want to ask you one thing." I said, "What's up?" He says, "Your letters it's full of a lot of FUs, right?" He says, "But I want to ask you one thing. What is the common denominator in all the problems you've had in prison?" And I knew the answer, and I was ashamed to say it, right? Because nobody had ever called me out like that. He says, "Bro, what is the common denominator?" And I'm trying to like, go around the answer. I'm like, "Well, listen, bro, I didn't do anything." He's like, "That's not my question, bro. What is the common denominator?" And I finally whispered, I was like, "Well, me, bro." He's like, "Who?" I said, "Me." He goes, "Exactly. So you have nobody to blame, bro, but your actions. You put you there. Had you not done anything to these guys in the past, why would they have a problem being with you? You're the problem. They're not the problem." I was like, "Yeah, bro, but I'm not the
Mm,
same person." He goes, "They don't know that. They just know this guy's coming here. Man, this guy hurt me in the past. I don't want him here." And so I sat there on the phone with them, and he gave me like a really wake up call. He's like, "Hey, bro, wherever you go, there you are." And I was like, "Bro, can you just like talk English to me? Like, well, what does that mean?" He's like, "Hey, bro, it doesn't matter where you go. If you keep bringing that same belief system, you're gonna get the same results."
mm,
I was like, "All right, bro." So I sat back there, and it was June 10, 2015, right? And I got my paper in the mail, and it said, "You have been approved to go to this other institution because these guys you have enemy concerns here. They consider you an enemy, so we're therefore transferring you over here." And so I sat there, and I was like, "I don't care where I go, I'm done with this lifestyle. Like I'm done." And so I got transferred to the other institution. When I got to the institution, you go. It's called classification. You go before the warden and associate warden counselors and stuff like that. And when I got there, the warden said, "Hey, Mr. Rodriguez, I've seen your file, sir. This is the last prison that you can ever program at. If you mess up here, you're going back to solitary confinement." I said, "Sir, you're not gonna have any issues. I promise you that. That person that's on that file no longer exists." And from then on, I went on this rabbit hole. Like I needed to understand why these people didn't want to program with me. And I started learning that I was a victimizer. These guys were victims, right? And I started to learn that it was not their fault that I didn't have healthy coping skills to process my anger. And so, because I had a lot of resentment this whole time I was sitting in solitary confinement, I am accepting, yeah, you know what, I did what I did, so they don't want to be around me. That's cool. But I still had resentment, like, oh, you guys are cowards, blah 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 blah. No, you created this, and then I put myself in their shoes again, going back to the empathy. Had I been a victim of abuse in the prison system, and I heard that my abuser was coming to the yard, what would have been my reaction? And then I right there, I was like, absolutely. If I heard that, this guy that victimized me in the past is coming to the same yard where I'm at, well, I don't want him here. He's gonna
Yeah.
abuse me. He's gonna victimize me again. He's gonna stab me. He's gonna do whatever he did in the past. And so I started to understand that all of my actions had a ripple effect. And this was years down the line. I hadn't seen these guys for a while, but it's still having an impact. My actions are still having an impact.
So how do you get from that point in this new institution to where you're leading, teaching others about, getting out or coping or not trying to relocate? I know that you were able to lead some programs in while you were still incarcerated before you left.
Yeah. So I went, like I said, I went down this rabbit hole. I needed to fully understand. Like I wanted to be able to explain exactly why we do what we do in the antisocial lifestyle. Antisocial means you're somebody that does not follow the rules, regulations, norms, or laws set by society, right? And I wanted
Mm.
to get a complete understanding because when I was reading all this stuff in solitary confinement, right, I got angry because I was like, how is this not common? Why are you giving us fantasy books? Why are you giving us sports books? Why are you give us trauma books? And so I went on a journey and I said, I need to understand why we do what we do. And so I started sharing. I created what's called Project Giveaway. That was one of the first charities I created in prison. And it's currently we're still doing it. And it was about healing through beating, is giving back to society because we as people that committed crimes, we have to make amends, right? We can do living amends, which is changing your character defects for spiritual principles. Instead of living by the character defects of what got you to prison, exchange those for spiritual principles. You were a taker, now you got to be a giver. And so that was why I created Project Giveaway to be able to create a platform in a way for us to give back, right? Indirect, right? Because we can't give directly to them. So I partnered with different charities. And in that journey, more and more I started learning. I was like, I need to share this with people in a setting where it's not I sit down with somebody for 5, 10 minutes and we have people interrupting. And so after I was in that institution, I got transferred to another institution. When I got to the institution, well, I created various programs throughout the prison system as I was being moved. But the last one I created is called The Psychology of Criminal Conduct. And through all the readings that I got, I was able to discover that there's 14 underlying causative factors, 14 things that happen in our childhood that then shape us into these antisocial people. I studied about domestic violence, parenting, anger, all this stuff, right? Substance abuse. And because I come from all of that, I was like, how can I create a program, a space without interruptions so that we can teach each other? And so I went to the staff, the housing staff. I was like, hey, look, there's this classroom here. Is it okay if I can use it from 9 to 11 and then from 11 to 1 to teach the class? And so I was given permission. And so on Saturday morning from 9 to 11, I would teach the English class. And then at 11 to 1, I would teach the Spanish class on Saturday. And then I would have to do it again on Sunday. So those weekends, that's how I just spend my weekends, right? And so I taught people how to identify their internal, external triggers, sensory triggers, right? What those are, right? And create relapse prevention plan. What are some coping skills that we need to develop and teach people that it is not what happened to us does not justify what we did. It just explains it away. And so I wanted to teach people like, hey, bro, I went from one end of the spectrum to where I am today. You can do it too. You just gotta want to. And I tell people, a lot of people in prison, they want to, they just don't have the know-how. And again, I always tell people, get mentors. What did it for me was mentors. Have a mentor that has no problem calling you out, not trying to put you down, but calling you out like, hey, that's not okay. And I do that. I have mentees, I have mentors, and I do the same thing that is done to me. Hey, like, hey, bro, don't do that because this, and this can happen. This is the impact of our actions. And so in that program, I created a space, and I still do it on TikTok. I talk about it all the time. Is all of our actions, right? There's an underlying There's an underlying cause of why we do what we do. So there's underlying factors, underlying causes and factors, and then motivating factors. What motivates it? Or what caused that motivation, right? So I was able to teach people and share people everything that I learned because I used to get angry like, why is this not available to everybody? And 25 people were able to parole that went through the last program that I created, and they're out here doing amazing things for society. They're
Amazing.
like doing great things for society out here.
It's an
Because
incredible impact.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's such an awesome journey that you are on relative to the point of when you read that book to today. We talked about this the other day before in preparation because I think this is a really important element that needs to be dug into. You read this book? Do you remember what year it was?
I want to say it was 2000. I want to say it was 2009.
That's what I thought.
I believe it was 2009.
You were in solitary for 6 years. You read this book. It's another 6 years before is it Sergeant Freeman?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Pulled you aside and said, "You can't be here. You have to go back to solitary." And in that 6 years, you read this book, changed you, but it was still another 6 years before you had to get called out by your mentor regarding these other folks. And here we are 10 years after that, right? Like this journey of healing is something you said to me that I think is so powerful. Is like it's hard, right? We talk about this all the time. Like we love having these conversations where you are because we can only have this conversation after. But what we don't see is the 16 years from that book to now in that journey. How did you keep the strength? How did you keep persevering through that? Like, what were the things that helped you work through it and keep the patience that you're heading in the right track versus be like, this is just too hard. I got to go back and do what I know. And that's where I'm most comfortable.
So for me, again, it was I never lost hope, right? Not of getting out. That ship had sailed for me. But when I
Yeah.
started reading this book, it created a different type of hope. Not the hope of physical freedom. They created a hope of spiritual freedom, emotional freedom, psychological freedom. Right? I was bound spiritually. I didn't know what that was. Uh, Emotionally, I was in cage, and psychologically, my belief system was very distorted. Right? So this reading all these books, it gave me hope that hey, even if you're never to get out, right, you can still live a productive and be contributing to your community while in here incarcerated and sharing it. The I had this yearning, like I got this bug inside me, like people got to know this. Like this is not just them. Like we're all experiencing it. But again, we're talking about as men, we're put in a man box, right? Especially in prison, you cannot show emotion, right? You have these guys that are very callous, right? But it's a form of self preservation. Like you don't want to be victimized, right? So you put on this mask. And when I started taking off the mask, it was like, oh, finally I could be myself. So showing people that it's okay to be your authentic self. It's okay to be emotional, right? That's what kept me going because there was times where I was like, man, like this is too hard. But then sharing my story with somebody and somebody saying, hey, bro, man, when you said that, that hit me. 'Cause I went through it. Oh, and I was like, okay, I'm on the right path. Keep it going. And the more people kept validating through their experience, my experience, I was like, "Well, I got something here then." And there was a lot of nights, and there still is nights where I sit with some of my trauma because healing, it's not a destination, it's a journey, right? And there's times where I
Mm.
sit there and I'll sit there and I'll cry, I'll cry for my inner child. There's moments where like the other day, I had been almost 20 some years that I flew a kite, and I got emotional seeing I flying a kite. And my wife, I didn't know my wife was videotaping me, but she made a video saying, Jesse is in his inner child flying a kite for the first time in 20 some years, right? And there's a lot of things that kept me going, but the biggest thing that kept me going was like my trauma is helping others open up their eyes like, hey, it's not my fault. Hey, I'm not
Mhm.
the only one. Hey, if that guy could do it, I can do it. So providing hope for somebody else through my pain was it was like the fuel. Like you gotta keep going. You can't stop now. Like all these
Mm,
guys are looking up to you now. You can't stop now.
And I think that's what's also amazing about the story is that you've been able to grow and scale this impact over time and over the years that you've been dedicating it to it. And the missing piece here is like, you were in there. There was a time where you didn't think you were gonna be a free man again. So how did we get to today where you get to be out?
So I believe it was in 2017, California changed the law, what's called youth offender law. So if you were the age between if you were under the age of 25, you're considered a youth offender, right? Meaning because they've done studies that the brain does not fully develop until the age of 25, right? So your frontal lobes, that doesn't fully get online, your executive brain until 25. And because I qualify under that, in 2021, I received a letter in the mail saying that I qualify under this law to go to a parole hearing after 25 years of incarceration. And so from 2021 to 2023, my thing kept getting postponed. Like, okay, well, you got to go because you got to go to a psych hearing because you got to evaluate it, and they give you, low, moderate, or high risk for reoffending. And so I was waiting for my hearing. I waited to go see the psych. And so in that time, I was still preparing, right? And so you have to prepare. It's called a lifer packet where you have to do a letter of it's called a ladder. It's a letter that is called a ladder. It's connecting the dots of how did you become this person, why did you do what you did? What motivated you to do it? And who are you today? You have to create relapse prevention plans. You have to create parole plans. You have to show that you have the support network. You have to show that you have the insight into who you were, how did you become that person and who you are, right? And so I went to sit before the site, and they do an evaluation, not only on what you say, what you have in your lifer packet, but your criminal history, your youth history, your incarceration history. They talk about, how did you grow up and stuff like that. And so I went there and see when I got it's called a ducket. When I got the ticket to go see the psych, it just said outside agency. So I'm thinking, okay, somebody's gonna come and interview me because I had been doing giveaways because one of our correction officers passed away. And so I thought, okay, somebody's gonna come and interview us about that because we have newspapers come in and interview us about the giveaways we used to do. So I went over there just like this, not prepared for an interview. And then the screen pops up and it says, "Hi, my name is so and so. I'm with the Department of Corrections, with the mental health department. We're going to do a psych evaluation for your parole board." I was like, "Oh, I didn't bring anything. Like I thought this was for something else." And she's like, "No, that's fine. We're just going to talk." And so they do an interview, talk about your childhood, your teenage years, and substance abuse, and all everything that happened to you to the point where you got incarcerated. And they talk about your incarceration and your actions, stuff like that. And so it was about a 3-hour interview, and I had no problem talking about it because I had internalized it. I had not intellectualized it, right? There's a big difference. And so I was able
Yeah.
to talk about, how I grew up and how that impacted me, how that led me to develop a very distorted belief system that then made it justifiable in my distorted belief system to commit the crimes that I did. And the continuation of those actions while incarcerated. And after that, she's like, "Okay." So it takes about 30 days to get the response from them. I got a low, which means like my rate for reoffending is very low. And she pointed out why. Have a great support network, have great insight into why I became the person, how I became that person, and then who I was today. And then having created all these programs uh, was very, very impactful for them because it's like you went from one end of the spectrum to today is two different people. And that's one thing I told the Slack, the man sitting before you is not that person, that was capable of doing such heinous crimes, right? And then after that, about 4 months after that, you go before the parole board. And so I went before I was two deputy commissioners and a commissioner. Usually there's one commissioner, one deputy commissioner. So I had 2 deputy commissioners and a commissioner. And, they put you through the ringer, which is their job to see
Mhm.
if what they're getting in front of them is authentic, or is somebody that's been, polished up,
Coached.
yeah,
Mhm.
coached and polished up for the interview. And so I got into talking and sharing my experience of how I grew up. It was the same thing that I did with the psych, right? And, it was very emotional for me because up until then, I didn't feel like my change was where I believe it should have been, right? Because 'Cause I'm like, "Man,
Mm.
all this work, like, I should be, like, more ahead of, like, I feel like I'm still a child crawling, like, I should be more." But when the, commissioners were interviewing me and they said, "Okay, well, we're gonna take a short recess to deliberate," right? I was sitting there, and then one of the guards says, he says, "Hey, Mr. Rodriguez," he says, "Just want to prepare you, bro. Like people like you that come into the pro hearing with your history usually don't get found suitable on the first time. This is not to discourage you. You did an awesome job." He says, "But hearing what you've done, like you've only been clean for about 7 years, right? 8 years compared to 25 years of nonsense." He's like, "It's been my experience that guys like you don't get found suitable." And it was a bummer. It made me feel like, damn, man, I thought I was there, right? And I said, well, you know what, sir? I said, with all due respect, I said, I'm not here to get found suitable. I'm here to take responsibility and accountability for my actions and the impact of those actions, right? And if they find me suitable, that's awesome. But it's not going to stop what I've been doing. I'm still going to be the same person that I've been doing. The only thing I was hoping for is that if I get found suitable and I get to parole, I get to do this on the free world where I have no limitations. And if you see everything that I do here at the prisons, I said I do a lot of stuff for the prison system, right? Just imagine me on the free world. Wouldn't you want me as your neighbor? He's like, yeah. He says, but I just want to prepare you. And so I was down, and my attorney too. He's like, hey man, you did an awesome job, but it's true what the correction officer saying. Like, bro, you have a very very extensive fighting history, and you don't have a lot of clean time. I said, no, I understand. I understand. So I got bummed out, but then the commissioners came back. There was one commissioner that he was like, he was attacking me constantly and everything I was saying. Well, how do we know that you're just not trying to manipulate us? And I said, sir, like this is who I am today. Like you don't have to believe me because you don't live on the yard. But I have at the time I had letters from a lot of inmates, officers. I had 5 chiefs, 5 mayors from the local communities. I had assemblymen. I had gang task force commanders because I taught a program to the local community about what to look for in the youth, how to prevent. Because once you get into intervention, it's very expensive. And so I was trying to educate. Let's stop it before you have to intervene, right?
Right.
And I kept saying, well, if I'm lying, right, then why are all these independent people that don't know each other, right, are saying these things about me? And it made me doubt for a minute that, you know what, maybe you are just imposter. Maybe this is not really people. These guys see you. It started doubting for a minute, but I was like, absolutely not. You're not here to get found stupid. You're here to take accountability and responsibility for your actions and what those actions cause. So when that they came back, they said, Mr. Rodriguez, before we get into the decision, we want to inform you that it was unanimous. And it hit me. It's like, yeah, they're not going to let me out. And I broke down. I broke down because it was hard to undo everything that I did. And I can never undo. I took someone's life that can never be undone. And I feel and I felt horrible at the time. But when the commissioner started talking, he started talking about all the bad stuff. He's like, you know, at 12 years old, at 14 years old, at 15 years old, 17, he just painted this monster. And I said, sir, that's exactly who I was. However, that's not who's sitting before you today. Absolutely not. The person sitting before you today wouldn't want to be part of that person you just described. And that person you just described will want to harm somebody like who I am today. And then they went into the positive stuff. It is true. He has done all this. However, he's created all these programs for the prison system. He's done this. He started going about all the positive. And he said, Mr. Rodriguez, we commend you for the change and we find you that you are suitable.
Mm.
That was when I felt like this is real. Like they see me beyond the paint job. Like they see beyond my past actions. They're actually looking at what I'm doing today for my community, even from incarceration. And so 150 days after that, well, it's 120 days. They review it. The entire board reviews it, and they see if they're in agreement with what the board found. And so everybody signed off. They said they agree with it, and then it goes to the governor, and then the governor has to sign off on. And so when I went to the governor, the last 30 days, so it's 120 days for the main parole board, and then 30 days for the governor. Those 30 days were the most stressful of my life because I was like, this is what they saw, and all they do is they just read the transcript. They don't sit with it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was notified by another inmate that the governor has signed off. It wasn't even my counselor. Usually, there's a counselor that calls you in, but it was an inmate. His name is Sean, one of my mentees that I helped get out of prison as well. He just got out. I think it was like 5 months after I got out. He got found suitable, but he called me and he goes, "Hey, bro, the counselor just told me to tell you the governor signed off on your parole." So I dropped everything I had and I went into the office. I said, "Hey, is it true?" He's like, "Yeah." I said, "Oh man, that's awesome." But then you have to wait to, sign all the parole paper and all that stuff. When the time that you have to wait, it's about a week's wait for them to process the release papers. I get hit with a Homeland Security warrant. They said, "Hey, you got to go to legal mail," and I get the paper that says Homeland Security, and I open it, and it says that they had issued a warrant for my deportation because of the nature of my crime, which was one murder to attempted murder, and the lengthy history of violence I had prior to going to incarceration. And then while incarcerated, I got caught with drugs, uh, weapons, cell phone, and stuff like that. So they're like, "You are a threat to our community." And I was like, "Well, didn't you just read the transcripts of the parole board? They said that I'm not." And so I had an interview, and they interviewed me. They say, "Hey, do you have anything to say?" I said, "Well, I'm just referring you to the parole hearing. They disagree with what you're trying to say about me." And they're like, "Well, you got to go before a judge because your parents are U.S. citizens, but you're a resident, and so we're petitioning to take that residency." So in that time, I spoke to family, and I said, "Hey, this is what's going on, and I'm very supportive. We'll get you an attorney. We'll fight it. We'll." And so when I get to the federal system from the state prison system, it was very discouraging when I started talking to other inmates. Where they're like, "Hey, bro, I've been here for a year, 2 years fighting it." Like they're not, and then I'm hearing their story, I'm hearing my story, and I'm hearing what they're going off of. Is like, then I have no chance. And so I sat down with family. I said, "Hey, you know what? I'm not going to fight this. I just did 26 and a half years. I appreciate all the support, but I'm not willing to give another 2, 3 years in the federal prison, just waiting in the hopes that it can get granted." And so I went before the judge, and the judge tried to discourage me, like, "No, no, sir, you need to, present your evidence and stuff like that." I said, "Ma'am, I just finished doing 26 and a half years. You can parole me to Australia, Africa. I'm gonna be a success anywhere in the world you send me." And so she's like, "Are you sure you don't want to talk about it? Think about it. Talk about it with your attorney, family." I said, "There's nothing to talk about. I'll sign right now." And she's like, "I'm gonna give you 10 days." I says, "Ma'am, I am not trying to stay here another 24 hours."
Yeah.
And so I signed off, and I was deported. I was deported so it's called self-deportation, and then you get a 10-year penalty. You could petition, but I was like, I'm okay. I'm okay. Africa, Australia, Mexico, I'm gonna be okay.
Well, I mean, I've got more that I want to put a pause in because we're a little past a half hour, because I want to come full circle on this, because I mean, just hearing the story I think is so important. And you got released in 2023, which I'm just making note of that specific to the audience so they understand the timeline. We're going to pause and we're going to do something we haven't done before. We're going to come back for a shorter third episode with Jesse next week. This is the More in Common podcast. Like, click, subscribe, do all the things, share, and we'll be back next week to wrap this conversation with Jesse.
All right, guys, let's do this again.